Okay, we'll get started. Hello and welcome everyone to Thrive, Lead, Succeed. I'm Sandi Hokansson, your host today, and I am Executive Coach and CEO of Sound Leadership. Today we're going to be discussing the important topic of leading social responsibility. And we have a fantastic guest with us today, Ms. Levicki Courville. And Lauren is president of Dress for Success Houston. And I'm going to be introducing Lauren in a moment. Okay. So for those of you that are new to the Circle is a forum for like-minded leaders to meet on a regular basis and inspire each other and learn from each other. And a variety of industries are represented, and it's primarily across North America, but occasionally we do get the odd European that joins. We all look forward to developing our own leadership practice and our own growth. And so we're all have a like mindset. Our previous Circle sessions can be found on my website at soundleadership.ca/resources. And if you missed our last session, we had Tyra Tudor, who is the president of TAD PGS, and she did an amazing discussion on mergers and acquisitions. So I really implore you to have a look at that if you have time. Okay, so now it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Lauren. Lauren has been a part of DFS Houston for part of the leadership team at DFS Houston for over 6 years, but she's been actively involved in volunteering in the Houston community and also at DFS Houston for 16 years. And she's been on the board, the advisory board, for the organization for 9 years. Lauren is deeply committed to the Houston community and the philanthropic community as well, and to advancing women in particular, and we're thrilled to have her join the Circle today. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Sandi. It's great to be here. Sorry, I'm here at our office, and if I sit too still, our lights go out. So if I do the dance back and forth, that's the why.
Okay, thanks for letting us know. Well, great. Let's get started. Why don't you first tell us a little bit about your role at DFS Houston and why you love what you do?
Absolutely. So I am the president of Dress for Success Houston, and we are a grassroots organization, been around we're in our 23rd year, and of empowering women. Much of the community knows Dress for Success as providing professional attire to women as they enter the workforce, and how much we've grown beyond the suit is what continues to inspire me as we empower women in our community here in Houston, and while we're our own individual affiliates, to know that globally with 145 affiliates in 23 countries, the impact that we're having is tremendous, because when you empower a woman, you also empower our community through engaging her children, our society. And I think we talk a little bit more sometimes than guys do. So what we share at Dress for Success in professional and personal development and the ripple effect that it has in our community is tremendous. So I'm passionate to work with virtually next to our team every day and think of new ways to engage our supporters and our women now more than ever. So it's a privilege to do the work that we do.
Yes, and when women rise up, communities rise up, society rises up. So it's fantastic that your organization has gone worldwide and is making such an impact now. So tell us a little bit about the corporate involvement that you have in corporate partnerships and how important corporate partnerships are to your organization.
Especially with Dress for Success here in Houston, we're about empowering women to enter the workforce and not just land a job, but build a career. So for us, corporate relationships and partnerships are extremely valuable, extremely important. as well, we're not funded through the government or United Way. So all of our supporters that fund our programs, we need all of them. And the corporate engagement, especially through our corporate guild, we have, it ranges between 50 and 60 executive women who serve on our guild from all different industries. And they're in the boardroom. They're in those budget discussions when, you know, we have a hard year like last year and entering into this year with the pandemic. And their voices for us saying, you can't cut Dress for Success. This is helping our community in this way. So without those voices, it would be a harder challenge for us to be in the room as much as we need to.
It was really impressive to hear how many women sit on your guild. That's fantastic. Maybe before we get into some other things, I'm dying to hear about how you've handled the pandemic and the pandemic has affected you, but maybe you could just share for everyone some of the key programs that you offer at Dress for Success.
Absolutely. So while we do offer the suiting program, again, that the name is a great name, but how much we've grown beyond the suit in our professional and personal development courses. So looking from financial literacy, legal literacy, health and wellness, mentoring programs. We also offer scholarship programs up to $1,000 a semester. And next year, we're extending that further. So women, when they're going into 4-year or higher education, there are no more barriers to enter as far as a financial gap that we see in the women we serve. We have veterans program, a whole engagement of women veterans, and we've had the opportunity of the honor of serving over 1,300 women veterans since 2014. And especially within that community, when we share that we're not government funded, that the Houston community is behind them in this program and the connectivity to help them with that isolation and the separation from military and transition to civilian life. It's not to discount the government, it's just to ensure and for them to hear that they're not alone in their journey anymore is invaluable. We also relaunched our job search program. So while we're not a job placement organization, we do provide job search skills to ensure that when a woman goes into that interview, she knows what to say, what not to say. Her LinkedIn profile looks successful. Her resume represents her in the best way. Interview preparation course, because we all know if a woman, if you've been struggling or you haven't had to interview in a while, what's changed in the virtual environment? How do you set up your background and technology? So we've really ensured that we can be there on a holistic approach too for a woman.
Tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has affected you and how you got through it.
So I think everyone, I know that we may cover North America to include Canada, but and the potential European attendee. For us, I can speak for a nation. The United States hasn't seen this low of a number of women in the workforce since the Depression. And so the impact of that for us as a nation, and then for us, you know, here in Houston, where we are, is tremendous. In the women who were in our professional women's group that we have had a relationship with, that we serve, 75% of them were impacted by the pandemic, whether they lost their job, hours were decreased, had to work more hours because people were laid off. So the unforeseen barriers and circumstances that women have faced due to the pandemic are tremendous. And so what we did is pivot to everyone, right? Pivot is the word. We transitioned in 2.5 weeks to start providing virtual programming to deal with stress and coping. How virtual school, how can you help your child in virtual school and balance the support that your team needs at your job. And we also started providing pantry pickup with a local grocer here because our food banks were so under-resourced and over-exhausted. So we really listen, we survey our women a lot and listen to what their needs are. And we're fortunate that we had the agility because of our supporters to meet their needs. We even provided COVID impact and relief support to women that were, you know, facing just the worst, you know, to be evicted with their children, lose their home, everything that we all saw and heard about in the news, we were hearing it firsthand. So while we're not a frontline agency, we became there and that community for our women even more, especially with Winter Storm Uri was just like a little fun cherry on the top. And the social, you know, the social injustice that came about last year was a lot of emotional capacity for the women to go through, and how we brought in speakers to help guide and support them as mothers in our community. And it was a lot. I will say we are so fortunate that our supporters continue to be there for us so that we could serve and continue to serve the women in these various ways, and that we're still here and we're still strong as an organization. So I'm beyond grateful to them, to include, you know, we couldn't have done it without our corporate supporters, again, who know we were communicating well with them, and they then were communicating well within their organization to heed the call of what we needed.
That's great to hear. And just first, I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations for, you know, getting through the year and just being able to turn on a dime and be more hands-on and be more, you know, as you say, frontline than perhaps some of your programs are used to being, because the need was so great. And I'm very pleased to hear as well that the corporate sponsorship remained very strong, because that's really critical, obviously, just to be able to respond to the need. Did you find throughout that that there was even additional corporate support, or did it just stay steady?
We had, you know, some corporations, just due to, you know, the impact of their industry or their company through the pandemic, you know, we had to have hard conversations. You know, I'll share United. United has been, since it was pre-United, you know, for us, it's pre-United Continental.
Yes.
And to have a conversation with them, you know, we were saying, we value the longevity and all that you've provided. And we know that you can't come in the same because of what you're facing. So what can we do with Miles, to keep our relationship, because we don't want to be short-sighted and say, you know, well, if you can't give us that X, Y, and Z money that you usually do, we're out of here. That's not a good steward and a good partner on any front, business, B2B, business to MPO, whatever it may be. And those relationships, like anything, are so valuable. So we had some hard conversations, and then we had other organizations that were doing well and came in with more funds along with being unrestricted. And we had foundations that said, you know, I know we were going to give to this program in this capacity. Please do as you need to do in order to keep your team employed and to serve our community, because you know how to do it best. So it was really inspirational to see and to not have that stress with everything else going on.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it was a really good example of united and, and recognizing that your partners are going through it as well. And they will have challenges too. And certain industries were really affected more than others. So, that leads nicely into my next question. And really, what makes a good partner? Obviously, one of the things you just talked about was being flexible and nimble and looking at the long-term relationship and not just short-sightedness. So, but why don't you add to that for us? So, what makes a good corporate partner for you?
Absolutely. So for us, it is that flexibility and for everyone, it's kind of what was is not what will be right now. And having those conversations as we've grown of what our needs are, it's not a suit drive anymore. It is, how can you come in and help facilitate LinkedIn classes, and how can we ensure that your volunteers will be there and show up and make that commitment, so we're not then short on capacity. It's listening to both sides, what their culture goals are, what their community engagement and initiatives are, and what ideas they may have and what ideas we can facilitate and have a capacity to do. And, it's just like anything, you may brainstorm 30 and you come back with one, and it's one great one. And from that, it's the seed that plants into building more. We've had a partnership with Chevron for 20 years, and it started as a small seed with hosting our suit drive. It was a 1-week suit drive when we started, that's now turned to a month-long campaign. It's been paused for 2 years. It will come back at some point. And through that, then volunteerism internally at the organization started, and leadership on our corporate guild, on our advisory council, and our board, our young professionals group, because the leaders of the organization brought in the people who were interested to volunteer at Dress for Success Houston. So, it's not a kind of a one and done. It's that ongoing relationship and hearing what organizations may need, because it's probably different than what it looked before. And just that creativity is invaluable. And while we may not be able to do something now, if it's a part of a strategic plan in 2, 3, 5 years, that's something that I think sometimes people think nonprofit like, oh, well, they just need it. They need our help. They need our help. Well, no, we're running like an organization and a business. We have to be mindful of timing, because we want to be good stewards as well. What does your brand look like? How are we sharing the partnership? Where's the logo? Where are the quotes? Where are the photos of those engagements, so that it can be a balanced community effort?
Yeah, very, very important. You talked a little bit about the Leadership Guild and with your Chevron example. Can you expand on that a little bit and maybe talk about the leadership development? I think when we talked earlier, you had mentioned that they had benefited as well from some leadership development. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So our corporate guild is our, again, comprised of 50 to 60 executive leaders in all different industries across the board. And Chevron has had a presence and a seat there from the beginning. And it has allowed, from the leadership and that engagement has then allowed those individuals to learn more about the organization and step into board roles. And then within our young professionals group, we've had young professionals be on that steering committee and that volunteer arm, and then they're grooming, and then they have become leaders in the corporate guild, and as well as advanced in their career within Chevron, within the company, because of the contacts they're making, the skills that they're getting, the experiences that, like we said, happen out of the boardroom, and those life skills and that compassionate leadership really falls in well with the attributes that we all need to be a leader. And again, especially moving forward in our climate that we'll see indefinitely.
Yeah, I love that phrase, compassionate leadership. Great, great, great term. So that's fantastic that, that they're giving, there's this corporate partnership, and they volunteer, but through that volunteerism, they're gaining leadership skills, they're gaining experiences, they're gaining exposure in the community, they're learning and, and building their skill set up as well. So that's a fantastic win-win for the partners. And then they can apply that back in the business, all the better, right?
Yes.
So share some other benefits. That's a fantastic one. What are some other benefits for companies to support an organization such as yourself?
From what we hear, it's also that you're not just putting it in a mission statement, right? I think the commitment to have employee resource groups and initiatives and all of that, that's great. If there's no legs or engagement or future action in it, then it's just words. And that doesn't help. We all know our culture, if we're just talking it and then there's nothing behind it, even if it takes a year to build up to it or however long, to keep your employees in the know that this is what we're doing, so that they feel that trust and that assurance that, okay, it's not just about the P&L, it's about the humanity. And if you're, surveying them and hearing what they're really passionate about, and if it's, whether it's women's initiatives or animals, trees, the environment, whatever it may be, ask those questions and see what will drive your team or your organization to get that engagement so that they feel a part of a community, not just a company. And that impact will pay off, in, as we all know, in retention, in growth, in talent acquisition, to feel a little bit more involved and embedded in their community, and allowing them to have that leadership opportunity. If they're not as seasoned in different leadership, well, this is a way where you want to lead this engagement. Here are the guardrails within that, go for it. And it gives them a chance for you as a leader and for them as, whatever, a young leader or an associate to show their commitment and to follow through in that engagement.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to hear you explain the key ties, the direct ties to company culture and employee engagement. And, especially with the up and coming demographics, the new entrants to the workforce, tying to purpose and organizational purpose is so important for people. I mean, it always has been, but the newer entrants are even more driven by that. And so, as you said, if the mission and vision statements and the purpose statements don't mean really anything behind it and don't come to life in some regard, that's going to come to roost. People are going to find that out. So these types of programs and partnerships between corporate organizations and not-for-profits are really key to really cement those ties closer and closer, and really improve that employee experience, right? So it's really fantastic to hear all of these firsthand accounts and these examples from you. Okay, so why do you think it's important for leaders to drive a social responsibility strategy, in addition to many of the other strategies they're responsible for driving?
Well, and I was going to say one more point, and to lead into that is, depending on the organization that you may be engaged with and volunteering, and for us, based on our mission, the opportunity to also, you never know if you could hire one of the women who are going through any of our programs. And so that's another, again, every nonprofit, of course, if you're like, we have Trees for Houston that I'm engaged with here, when you're at a tree planting, you can't get that tree to come work for you, but you never know what talent you may encounter too. And so I think why this strategy is important, again, it is that the action behind the words. And in a lot of our leadership and development conversations internally, it is, we can have, as Dress for Success Houston, we can have goals and aspirations, but if we don't take actions on them and put it pen to paper, and then what those deliverables are, what that means, no one will be successful. So I think it's important to take the time, because again, that retention, and people want to trust. You can't, with the social unrest this summer, there were a lot of companies throwing up the D&I initiatives and all of this. Well, what's the follow through behind that? And it doesn't need to be immediate, but again, sharing what your commitment is within the community. Target, I think, has done a really good job of that and being behind it, but the follow through is important. So I think it builds trust. And as you're sharing, the next generation that's coming up wants even more than we have, that community and social responsibility and social engagement. So whatever your organization, your company is, what could be a good fit and a good marry, depending on what you all do as a company that makes sense to partner with. And I think it's also okay to say no to organizations when they approach you. It's just a matter of understanding the why. Right now we have the capacity to focus on X, Y, and Z, and that's where we're going. And if there's a chance down the road, let's have that conversation. So, and I think it does. I think it brings also some fun and levity, and, hopefully when, we can all just bring our mask and be safe and figure out engagement, because people are yearning for that, that time. And, if you're mentoring the youth in your communities, who knows, that individual could be a part of your team down the road. So it's also, of course, in my core, and it makes sense as to why, but there will be a return in depth for sure.
Yes. So many fantastic returns whether it's culture, whether it's engagement, whether it's up and coming talent, whether it's strictly just making those values come to life and giving back in the community. But there's just so many, really. And I really like what you said about, finding out what's important to the people that work in these organizations, what's a good culture fit, what's meaningful to them, because consistency is important too. When you talked about what makes a good partner, right? It's so important that there's follow through, right? It's better that they commit to one or two partners and really deliver and follow through and get embedded in those organizations versus, signing up for a lot of things, but not really, then having a consistency issue. So that's given us a lot of food for thought, I'm sure, for all the leaders on the phone, reassessing perhaps their own social responsibility programs and strategies, but also where else they could, make an impact in 2021. And why, I'm drawn to Dress for Success, and always has been, is because it focuses on enabling, a very key demographic to support them to participate in the workforce. And with the recession that we've had and the pandemic, many are calling it a she session. And so your organization is very timely to help find a way out of that. Okay, great. So I'm going to open it up for a question or two now before we wrap up with our final question. So I'm going to open it up and just see if anyone that's joined us today has a question for the group.
Hello, Sandi.
Oh, hi, Chris.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question for Lauren. I was just wondering, how do you recommend that companies go about picking a not-for-profit?
Chris, may I ask what industry you're in or what company?
Well, we're in hearing aids, and I like to stray a little bit from the healthcare. I'd like to go into something different just to keep people engaged in our community.
And I think just asking your team and then seeing if there's, an organization that aligns with your company culture, and that may be doing innovative things and in a market where it may sound bad, but it's marketing too, right? So
right.
If they're in a market where that's a market you all want to play in, not necessarily healthcare, but if there's, I don't know, an organization that is really forward thinking and innovative and in front of a lot of people, and they're grassroots and they don't have a lot of supporters, but their team is so active and engaged, to get in with them and ask, what support do you need? Is there something that you're missing? Do you just need monetary support? And we can build a strategic partnership plan. Because again, that branding and awareness is, we see it as a value for us that our name is out there. But in the same way, it's just as important for whatever community partner you engage with, that they follow through on that. That
right.
It's not just one social media post. What is the story at different events? How do you have a presence? How do you, if you want, board engagement down the road, what are those conversations that you should be having? I hope that helps. It's hard, without like where you are, what the culture is, all of those things. So
of course,
I would really, listen to, depending on how big the company is, the managers or executive leadership are to poll everyone and get an idea of where the interest overall may be, and then have someone else do the research and propose, here are three nonprofits. Again, I think giving the ownership to a leader that wants more, that isn't in an executive level, for this to be a passion project of theirs, creates even more excitement and ownership and releasing of the reins for them to feel empowered to take on a project that's also not just supporting the bottom line, but that the humanity aspect.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Chris.
asking.
Great question. I had another one come in just in chat as well here that I'll share with you, Lauren. So the question is, obviously there's other ways to contribute besides financial, but do most organizations that support you give a certain amount of financial support and then also commit to volunteering, or do you have some options where it's strictly volunteering? Tell us a little bit about the options there for organizations.
So for us right now, it really, because of the restrictions with the pandemic, our volunteer engagement with our corporate supporters does correlate with those who already are contributing to us financially. Individually, you know, we have individuals where they support us and we get the, you know, the time dollar. So that's another way that you can do it, where we have a company that doesn't support us through the organization. However, we have some of their team that volunteers on their own, and then we get a match for their volunteer hours from the company. So there's you know, you have payroll deductions. So even just offering different ways, depending on your capacity as an organization, to get engaged if the company can't, or, I mean, there's a company here that they feel that they pay their employees enough, that their employees should take on their social responsibility on their own. And so we have some of their employees that volunteer individually with Dress for Success. So it just depends on where the organization is in their journey as well. So our group volunteers to help us go through our donations and our professional attire and all of that used to be at no cost. And then we were just, every Friday, we were overwhelmed, and the planning, because we have a brand too that we want to be mindful of. So if anyone comes to volunteer with us, we want it to be a positive experience, not just because of the corporation, but those individuals, and we all know the word of mouth. Yes. And the impact that has. So we did start asking for a contribution for those volunteer groups, just in order for us to ensure that we could continue them. And this is obviously pre-pandemic. Right now, we don't have any volunteer groups coming through the door.
No. Yeah. Okay, that's great. That's helpful. Thank you for that. So any final recommendations for leaders if they're beginning to map out a social responsibility strategy?
I would suggest, you know, again, the internally figuring out who the key person is. If anyone, and I would gather the answer is yes, anyone within the executive leadership team or in your team, again, depends on the size of your company, your organization, to hear what strong nonprofits are, you know, to look at Charity Navigator and to do your research to ensure that, you know, the organization is going to be there. It doesn't mean that someone who's been there for only 5 years in your community isn't going to be there in the long run, but what do their financials look like? Take a tour, do your research first to make sure that the organization you're investing in is going to have, you know, the staying power, and listen to your company's goals, your employees' objectives, and then move forward from there. And I think we all know communication is key. So if once it's shared that you're going to go down this road, I think it's fine to say it may take a while, but we'll let you know along the way as we find that community partner, instead of just saying, hey, we picked Dress for Success Houston, and there's no inclusion in making that decision. Then it feels very forced, and then you have resentful volunteers coming to volunteer with said organization. Did that help answer the?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And I think it was interesting as well that you added in the information around doing research on the not-for-profit. We hadn't really discussed that, but that's really important because a lot of these partnerships take several years to really cement and build from a long-lasting point of view. And you want to make sure that the not-for-profit has some legs, obviously, right, that can go the distance as well. So that was a really good point, I think, for leaders to take away. But then, of course, just the other pieces around, trying to find that good match, and then doing your research. So that's fantastic. If there's leaders on the call today that want to support Dress for Success, what's the best thing to do? Can they contact you directly? Is there someone in your organization they can contact? Because I could send that information out.
Feel free to contact me directly. And if it's not, I don't want to share, well, that sounds bad. I don't want to not accept any sort of support. However, if you're in, North America and there's another affiliate that's close by, that I have a relationship with, or it's worldwide in New York, even though we all run individually, the mission is the same, and we may look different in our program scope, but I'd be happy to speak with you. And yes, Sandi, if you want to share my information, and then our affiliate, like our direct website, as well as dfshouston.org. And I can put it in the chat as well, but just to give you an idea, and again, in that research, that Charity Navigator is a great way to see the financial strength and how many stars. Again, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't not work with said organization. It's just do your research. And I feel like everyone has some sort of pulse on a community leader, and to ask them the questions and what their collaboration looks like. I mean, we collaborate with all of our social service organizations, our universities, our employment office, Workforce Solutions. So if collaboration is a big part of your company, so like Chris, what you were sharing in your goals or outreach, if that's important to you, you can also look at nonprofits that work together, because that helps that chance to make those connections.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'm learning a lot about what you do and how much you supported the community through last year and through the pandemic, and all the changes you made to support and advance women that were really on the forefront in a variety of ways of the toughest parts of what we've gone through. But it's just been great to hear about the legacy that you have and the strong partnerships that you have as well. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much for spending time with us on this circle. And I really appreciate you joining and sharing your words of wisdom with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for including me, Sandi, and thank you all for being here. And again, even if you just have questions, not necessarily about supporting Dress for Success, I'm happy for you to reach out and talk through any ideas, because we all know just that chance to speak through suggestions and thought means so much for all of us. And now that we're even more connected through Zoom, it doesn't matter
Yes.
where we are.
That's
So,
exactly right. That's exactly right. Anywhere in the world. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Well, our next Thrive, Lead, Succeed webinar is Wednesday, June 16th at 12 noon. Eastern Standard Time, and Marcus Sawyer will be joining us, and he is a digital guru, and he's recently launched his own organization called the EQ Community, and he'll be talking about leading digital transformation, which is something that we all need to rise up and take a hold of these days. So I hope that you will join us there, and looking forward to seeing you all in June. Thanks for joining today. Goodbye, everybody.